Natural selection. In this report, I will describe the lab and the intricacies of evolution. That includes natural selection, the various factors that can influence natural selection, genotypes and phenotypes, the functions of alleles, and the eventual results of evolution. What is evolution? According to an article by Nature.com, evolution is defined as the process which a species undergoes in an attempt to adapt to its environment. The image on the right here is a picture of Darwinian finches, each of which have evolved to fit into their own individual niches. What is natural selection? According to an article by the Natural History Museum, natural selection is an event that occurs when organisms are less adapted for their environment are replaced by better adapted organisms of the same species. The image here on the right is an image of a moth that has recently undergone natural selection to become darker. That is a result of industrialization in its environment. How does natural selection influence evolution? The organisms that are chosen by natural selection further their species and influence evolution because their traits are the ones that survive. The traits of the unselected organisms die with them and are not passed down. Here's an example of how giraffes have eventually evolved to have longer necks. The giraffes with the shorter necks were at a significant disadvantage compared to the ones that had a new niche with the longer necks, and that eventually led to evolution. What is an allele? According to the National Human Genome Research Institute, an allele is one of two versions of a DNA sequence. An individual inherits two alleles, one from each parent. A dominant allele will always result in a positive trait if the gene is homozygous. It can result in a positive trait if the gene is heterozygous as well. A recessive allele can only result in a positive trait when paired with another recessive allele. What is a genotype and what is a phenotype? According to an article by the Garvan Institute, a genotype is a person's unique DNA sequence. A phenotype is an observable trait that occurs as a result of a person's genotype and the environment they are reared in. What is the purpose of this lab? In this lab, I tested my knowledge of natural selection and applied it to a real-world situation. The rabbit medium allowed me to effectively assess the importance of fur and how lack of camouflage can affect the population. What were the possible genotypes and phenotypes of this lab? FF, homo, furred rabbit. FF, hetero, furred rabbit. FF, homo, furless rabbit. What was the selective factor in our lab? In this lab, the selective factor was the cold weather and the potential absence of camouflage, resulting in death by predation. What was my hypothesis? If a rabbit is born furless, then it is at a natural disadvantage and thus more likely to perish under stressful circumstances. Procedures. Step 1. Formulate a hypothesis. Step 2. Set up 3 cups labeled FF, FF, and FF. Use red beans to represent F alleles and white beans for F. Step 4. Place 50 F and 50 F beans into a paper bag and mix. Step 5. Randomly select 2 beans from the bag to form a rabbit. Step 6. Pair into corresponding cup. Step 7. Count number of each genotype and divide by 2. Step 8. Remove FF rabbits because they were eliminated by natural selection. Step 9. Return remaining alleles to bag and repeat the process 10 times. Step 10. Count and record number of F and F alleles after each generation. Step 11. Create a line graph and show changes in genotype frequency. Step 12. Analyze the trend of F and F alleles in the experiment. Results. Here's a table listing the results I'd observed in my lab. According to the results on the previous slide, the rabbits born without fur very quickly died from exposure and/or predation. Without this protection from the environment, the rabbit stood no chance and fell victim to natural selection. Rest in peace. Discussion. What was the original frequency of alleles? According to the data slide, there were 100 F alleles and 46 F alleles at the beginning of this experiment. In the 5th generation, there were 100 F alleles and 12 F alleles. Why did the frequency of the alleles change? The number of F alleles remained the same, but the number of F alleles decreased because they were unable to compete in the bitter cold environment. This resulted in the number of recessive alleles dropping to 0. Immigration and immigration. In a real-world environment, rabbits would occasionally move from the original gene pool to another and vice versa. This fluctuation of organisms would add additional genetic makeup to the simulation and slightly muddy the waters. To simulate this influx of organisms, periodically throughout the experiment, I would remove 2 or 4 beans and add an additional 2 or 4 randomly selected out of a bag of mixed beans the next round after the first immigration of rabbits. How is this an example of evolution? The simulation is an example of natural selection impacting multiple generations of rabbits. The rabbits are eliminated based on their ability to adapt to their environment. Without fur, a rabbit will either freeze or become easy prey for a predator. Eventually, the rabbit population evolves beyond the furless genetic traits as all carriers are eliminated or breed with a furred rabbit. How do lethal alleles survive? Making use of the virtual Punnett square resource, we can see that a recessive allele can be passed down without its phenotype being represented. The organisms that retain the recessive trait may pass down the trait to its offspring, and the offspring may represent the recessive trait. If not, it may continue to transfer that recessive allele until it is counteracted by a mate with homozygous dominant genes. Did I observe the results I expected? Yes, I observed that the recessive allele was gradually eliminated over time as the organisms bred with heterozygous and homozygous dominant allele carrier organisms. Do the results support my hypothesis? Yes, the results support my hypothesis. As the rabbits were exposed to fatal environmental factors, the community of hairless rabbits unfortunately died off as a result of natural selection. Here is a list of sources cited within the slideshow. Thank you.